Right. Hello. Welcome to AWS Made Easy Ask Us Anything episode 15. We're your hosts, Stephen Barr and Rahul Subramanian.
Hey everyone, I can see we have a new location and we are both in the same room, which is very usual.
Same continent.
Same continent. In
Yeah.
fact, we happen to be in Anaheim, California for the AWS Summit. A lot of exciting stuff happening over here. So if you happen to visit the summit here in Anaheim, please come and to us. We'd love to catch up. And yeah, we have some exciting talks planned.
You get two talks. We're
Yes.
very excited about those. I tweeted about those earlier, so make sure to go and look those up if you happen to be here, or just introduce yourself, and make sure if you are attending the event to go to the Tequila and Taco Fix. That's going to be a fun after party to the event.
We have lots of very, very fun stuff planned for the entire day tomorrow. So yeah, looking forward to meeting some of you who can join us over there. But we have an interesting lineup.
Yeah. Well, first, how was your weekend other than, I guess, packing and traveling? But
a lot of traveling, in fact. I didn't realize that the flight all the way from India to LA was that long. I haven't flown directly to LA in a while. So I flew by Dubai, and that was nearly a 16-hour flight. I think it's been a while since I've done that long. So yeah, it was interesting. I got through an entire book during the flight. So that is pretty good.
You could do the entire Lord of the Rings extended versions, and if you were efficient, you could probably get the Hobbit there too. So
yeah,
that's a lot of flying.
Yeah, so that's it was good. I actually got some good reading done on the flight, and yeah, I'm just hoping that you don't see me yelling away during this session. I'm still busy jet lagged. I just came last night, but hopefully we'll get through this because there's some exciting stuff we're going to talk about.
With Seattle to Anaheim was a lot easier. I think it was under 3 hours.
How was your weekend?
Oh, very, very easy. I think we've had a lot of relatives coming in and out. So this weekend was mostly downtime with me and my wife, kids, and it was relaxing. We went to a little coastal community and just spent the day there. Just the kids picking up eggshells and throwing rocks into the water and just having some relaxation. It was really nice.
Nice.
All right, well, let's jump to our first segment, which is a Jeff R. article on AWS Private 5G. So here we go. Okay, so this one is build your own private mobile network. Okay, so I got a shout out in this post, so I want to give a little bit of context. So mid-1990s, so I was 8 to 10 years old. So I was one of these young family and 5 or 6 kids in the basement. It was a really fun setup. And so my dad said, okay, we bought a box that contained a bunch of 3Com network cards, a hub and drivers and cables, and set up a home network. He had this Visio flowchart that had everything in there. I still remember because at that time our ISP allocated us an entire Class C, so we were all 209.20.218. And it was really neat. Back then it was giving them out for free. What are they going to do with this? Addresses. These were the cards that we were using. I still remember this, the 3Com 3C509B combo card. And I remember going through the menus and setting every IRQ setting and to make sure that my sound blaster and the network card work at the same time. So
yeah, I remember these use the wax cables, right?
They could use either. That's the combo card. You can use either the token ring or the regular Cat. Well, at the time it was a Cat 2, but Cat 5 cables.
Yeah, I remember doing this coax cables and setting up a ring network with these chips. So that's pretty cool.
So now fast forward a couple of decades, and AWS is announcing private 5G networks. So this is an interesting one. Okay, we have according to the blog post, it's it gives you a box of hardware and software. You can deploy your own private mobile network in a matter of days. So I guess when you sign up for this service, Amazon will give you the radio and the SIM cards. It's 4G for now and 5G in the future. and AWS is managing the infrastructure. You can get APIs for, I assume, registering new SIM cards or for changing some of the radio parameters. This is an area I know a lot about. So what's the initial reaction to this?
So I just found it funny that AWS 5G is really 4G. That was definitely interesting. But as I was getting through this, I was trying to understand where we would be using this. So each radio right now supports 100 SIMs. Okay. And I think a lot of the use cases that they talk about are about IoT and manufacturing use cases. But if you really think about it, you need an internet backbone somewhere near radio. So if you're going to have the internet backbone anyway, and you have a manufacturing unit, wouldn't Wi-Fi just be easier? And you could spread Wi-Fi as much as you want across that setup. Or if you had multiple, locations spread, then you could, use any of the Ubiquiti hardware or Cisco hardware, whatever, to these point-to-point networks over radio signal, and then have Wi-Fi locally. So I'm still struggling a little bit to understand who uses this, which customer. They haven't put out a use case yet, which actually would really help to understand the use cases. I know that Amazon doesn't build anything unless there is a customer use case. So I would love to know who is actually using this and why. Also, when you look at pricing, this is pretty pricey, right? I mean, it's what, $10 an hour, if I'm not mistaken.
Here we go. Pricing. Each radio unit is $10 an hour with a 60-day minimum. So we're at 60 times 24 times
it's almost
10.
$90K.
Just to start.
Yeah, that's about $90K a year to set up 100 radio devices, 100 cell phone points. And that's not much. I mean, we could easily do, like for $9,000, you could have state-of-the-art Wi-Fi all over the place. You could really wire up every IoT device if you needed.
So there's got to be someone who reads this post and says, this is exactly right. We've been reading this and Wi-Fi doesn't work because of... And initially I was envisioning this in some very isolated factory where it didn't have cell service, but maybe it's a place where it's very crowded, or there's some radio regulations around Wi-Fi, or the Wi-Fi spectrum is too crowded. I'm not sure. I'm trying to envision exactly. I'm open to the idea that someone out there has read this and said, I need this. But I'm not jumping out at who that is.
Yeah, I mean, there is one aspect to it, which is this just seems really simple to set up. So if you're a provider who is trying to set up 5G, something like MVNO or whatever, this may be an easier to get there. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure why or how someone would use it. It's just really easy to get set up. So you probably get an entire telco set up in a week with far less expense. And in fact, time to market is key. So you could probably do that. Right now, you have to piggyback on one of the big, wireless providers. So instead of that, if you wanted to just set up your own from scratch without being dependent, you could just get a big pipe of internet bandwidth and provide your own service with whatever plans or you want. But given that every radio only supports 100 SIMs, that seemed like a limitation and a big one of that. And for the price, I'm not sure.
This definitely seems that you'd want to have predictable usage.
You would have a fixed number of, IoT devices that are running on this. So again, I'm not entirely sure what real use cases or who the customer is that they do this for.
Well, and this is, I didn't realize that at this point they're still adding the mobile radio unit feature. So this might really be isolated from people out in manufacturing facility or even temporary construction job site, something that and maybe they don't need external. Maybe they just need to talk to each other in a way that 5G is better than Wi-Fi in this particular use case. Maybe because of the device support, or sure. But
Wi-Fi is pretty much all devices support Wi-Fi today.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Scratching my head. So I think if I were to score this one, we're scoring on 1 to 5 on content, right? I think I'd give this a 2. Simply that we
Sure.
still don't know
Yeah.
where and how to use it.
All right. I think that's just for the fact that it would be really interesting if we, okay, this is who's going to want to use this. That's the most, I think, missing part of the picture. And again, maybe I'm going to bet that there's someone out there who's going to read this and say, okay, this is the thing that solves my problem. Obviously, it is. Maybe I wouldn't have built it, but it's hard to know what it is. All right, so we'll give that a 2. Let's do that.
Yeah, I would. The other thing that I would actually like is for them to have state very clearly what the problem statement was. Right? When you look at every other AWS service, there's a problem statement that that service tries to solve. Here, either the problem statement is we deploy a 5G network. But why? Why do you need to deploy a 5G network is something that I would that I'm really confused. I know it takes a while. So is this meant for telco providers? Is it meant?
Okay,
but it's
here we
supposed to
go.
be private for you.
Okay, so on the product page itself, okay, so smart manufacturing, security, campus connectivity, worker productivity.
But
So
shouldn't Wi-Fi
these
do
could
all of this? Like, why is Wi-Fi not the right answer for this?
Yeah, I guess that's the question that that's $90,000 a year question is what is this advantage over Wi-Fi?
Because at the end of the day, there is a internet backbone that supports this. You have to plug in your thick pipe that comes in and plug it into the radios. So all your communication is going through that network. So why 5G and not Wi-Fi? That's what I'm really confused about.
Yeah. All right. Well, all right. Well, I guess we'll look forward to learning more about this one. All right. Well,
Okay.
I think that's that. Oh, and I guess for simplicity versus complexity, it's almost like too early to tell.
Yeah, we don't know the use case, so it's hard to say. We don't have a use case to say it makes life easier. For right now, I think given the trade-off between Wi-Fi and 5G, the fact that we don't understand it, I'd say this confusing things a little bit.
All right, so I have to come up with more graphics.
Yeah, so I think leave it open and we'll try and get more clarity from the AWS team. And it's good that we are at the AWS Summit, so we'll probably get someone tomorrow or today and see if we can get this question answered.
Perfect. All right, well, let's switch gears over to RDS. Okay, this one is Amazon RDS for SQL Server supports M6i, R6i, R5b instances in additional regions. So let's see. First, the R family is growing itself. You did some research on trying to differentiate the R instances. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, to be honest, it's starting to get pretty confusing. So you have the R5 family. You have the R5, which are the old Intel processors running at 3.1 hertz. Then you have the R5As, which are the AMD family of processors, and then you have the R5B, which are the latest generation Intel instances, also running at these are latest generation Intel ones that are running at 3.1 gigahertz, but can peak to 3.5 gigahertz. So that's pretty interesting. But at the same time, you also have the R6 family already there. So you have the R6As, which are the latest EPYC processors from AMD. And then you have the R6G, which is the graphics-based processors, right? And if you look at the price difference, the Intel ones, that is the R5 and the the R5B, are both about 20% more expensive than the AMD family. That's the R6A as well as the R5A. I'm already getting very confused in my head as I talk about these. But the R6G,
Okay.
which is the latest
Yes.
Graviton processor, is about 40% cheaper than the R5B, which is the latest one that Intel just
So I
announced.
think that our advice then is going to always be the same: is stick with Graviton unless you have a really good reason not to.
Correct. I mean, it makes absolute sense to just stick with the Graviton processors for RDS. And though I'm not entirely sure if a SQL server specifically runs on the R6Gs.
I see. So even
So-
though there are R6Gs, but that might be R6G for
Correct.
MySQL or Postgres.
Correct.
Okay.
But there, the answer should basically be I have to check whether the SQL servers will continue to run on or will run on the Graviton processors. I doubt they do, but at least the R6As should run. There should be no reason to run the R5Bs anymore because the R6As are already faster and cheaper by 20% over the R5Bs. So I don't know why people will want to use more R5Bs.
Now, if we look at the R6i itself, that's a lot of compute in a database instance. Who are using these kind of? Why do you need so much compute? I thought for databases it's mostly about memory and storage. Why do you need that much compute in a
So
database?
the I instances are mostly about IOPS. Okay, now base need tons of IOPS and memory. What happens with the database is you want to take all the stuff that's in your disk, load as much as you possibly can into memory, and then your CPU operations are relatively straightforward because they just look at memory address, looking at your indexes, in the data and pulling it up. Right? So
joins and all
the
that.
CPU operation is relatively light when it comes to databases. It's mostly about your disk IOPS to load stuff into memory and how much memory can give the database. Now, the funny thing is that, especially with SQL Server, there's a history where tons of products have leveraged historically a lot of stored procedures. So they've used these databases almost like compute. And I think that's where the big problem lies. They've stopped using the database like a database. They use it like an app server. With a lot of business logic kind of shoved into those databases. And I think that's the wrong approach. I don't think you should be doing that to databases. They were not originally designed to do that. There's tons of hacks that have gone in. You want to keep database operation as light as possible in the relational model and keep the logic outside. Today, you don't have any of the trade-offs to be made, whether it be network or CPU or IO. You can get all of them outside of the database. Back in the day, you had to move 10 gig out of the DB into your app server, you would think twice. You'd really question how you're going to get that because the latencies were crazy high.
So in this case, you always think, okay, well, I've got all the CPU power. I'm not limited. I just need to go to the 32x large, which has 128 CPUs.
Correct.
But then you're not thinking, okay, you're not bumping into this constraint where you're thinking, is it really a good idea to put all of this business logic or data processing? I mean, I've seen machine learning models built as there's one place I did a consulting project and I saw a machine learning model that was built out of a generated set of about 1,400 stored procedures. They were wondering, why is the database getting so slow? And it was this incredible just mountain of stored procedures that created thousands of intermediate tables and all this stuff. And it works in theory, but it was definitely not the right approach.
Yeah. Also, from software maintainability standpoint, it's just untenable in the long run. I mean, I've seen products with over 1,000 stored products, and you don't know how to deal with it. Migrating to new versions becomes hard. Migrating off of the expensive licensing into more common databases is incredibly hard because your business logic is all over there and you don't know how to deal with it. So yeah, it's a really tough space to be in. If you have tons of stored, try and get that out there so that you're more flexibility, and then you're using the database itself for its core operation. If you look at the instances over here, all of these instances have 12.5 Gbps at least in terms of network bandwidth. Some of them have over 30 Gbps. Right? I mean, if you look at R6 ID to 24, they use 37.
37.
Yeah, all the way up to 37. The R6 are metal. goes up to 50.
So you'll be able to get your data out.
You can get your data. I mean, that's the network is no longer a constraint like it used to be, even just a decade or two ago. So yeah, stored procedures, I think, is one of those, sorry, it's one of those bad practices that has come in with the relational data stores and has stuck on.
Well, and not just that, but they're not commented very well. They're not version.
Yeah.
It'd be great if they had CI/CD around them, but often they're just, you open the stored proc editor, write it down, and then someone else finds it and builds on it. And there's not even a lot of thought that goes into actual data dependencies or redundancy. It's just easy to find one view that already exists and build on it, and another one.
Correct.
And the same, you can have a lot of redundant computation, but SQL doesn't really help you with that.
True. So you want to get rid of as many of the stored blocks as possible and move them into business logic that you can manage, maintain, just make your life easier. Keeping them in stored blocks isn't tenable in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to this article itself, RDS for SQL Server, what do we think? I mean, this is obviously simplicity in the sense that if you didn't have it before the regions and they do, life is better.
Yeah, I think so. M6i, R6i completely makes sense. Definitely simplifies. The one point that I would ding for is the R5B, because I don't understand why you would want to launch the R5B. The R6A should be a better option for SQL Server.
Is it? I guess so. They're saying R5B compared to R5, but then why would you just go to R6?
R6A is already there. R6A was launched some time ago, and R6A is 20% cheaper than the R5B. It's already the next generation EPYC processors. It is x86 architecture. It's just not Intel. And your RDS SQL Server should run just fine on that. So why wouldn't you use R6A against the R5B?
And that would be a really interesting bit if they said, okay, the people who are going to be using the R5Bs, what would in the big picture, what's stopping you from switching to an R6 instance? So
yeah, there's nothing.
So what do we put in terms of our rating? I say I'm thinking about a 3.5. I mean, it's very clear. Yeah. There's nothing wrong. It's got plenty of examples. It's got all the data you need.
Sure.
It would be nice if there was a bit more bigger picture, but I mean that's not really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 3.5 for a. Do we 3.5? No, we do.
There's a little half cloud there. All right.
So you give it 3.5 clouds. Okay. Awesome.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then when we get back, we're going to be talking. What is our next one? We're going to be talking about the interactive video service. All right, we'll be right back.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right. This segment, we're talking about Amazon Interactive Video Service. Okay, so what is Interactive Video Service? So this is a live streaming platform. Okay, we can use Interactive Video Service, basic channel for HD 720p, full HD. And then this is expanded functionality designed to enable streamers and viewers globally to enjoy higher video quality when using a basic channel. So, okay, so who are the users of Interactive Video Service?
So the Interactive Video Service is really cool. Think of the Interactive Video Service as taking a live stream and then adding or embedding that with a larger application that can do really interesting stuff with that live stream. So, for example, if you were doing a sports broadcast, you have your commentary and your live broadcast going on. But at the same time, imagine being able to present all the stats or predictions about what's going to happen in the game. Doing all of that live as the video stream is coming in, that's incredible. Yeah. That's basically what the AVS service is all about. we're using IVS. In fact, we have to demo this on another day, and it works better when there are multiple of us
Yeah.
as part of the conversation. So I guess once I'm back in India and broadcasting from there, we'll definitely do a demo session with IVS, because I think that's a pretty cool service. What we do internally with IVS is we have a lot of meetings that we do across the organization. When you have a few thousand people
And
working in
fully
an
remote.
organization. Yeah, completely remote. These online meetings are a big part of our organizational knowledge and our organizational knowledge base. And one of the challenges of remote, as we all know, is when you're doing these Zoom calls or a Chime meeting or whatever, it ends up monologue. A lot of people become disengaged, and the speakers usually have no idea about engagement
Yeah.
across the audience. You could have somebody literally typing away and doing other stuff. So we've created a little IVS, solution, which takes our Zoom and Chime meetings and so on, and it does real-time live analysis of what's going on in the meeting.
Building on Amazon's other products.
Correct. It uses Comprehend to understand what conversation is all about, so they can search it later if it's recorded. You can search for it. You can figure out what the meeting about, and you can go back to it. You can refer to it based on the keywords that Comprehend finds and the topics that Comprehend finds. Of course, you can train it with custom vocabulary like we discussed last week. So you can do all that stuff with it. The other thing that it does is it also uses video stream recognition. So it looks at facial sentiment. So whether somebody's confused, disengaged, happy, or angry, or agitated, to make sure that we are, that the feedback comes back to the speaker, and generally as part of the analysis of the call, you understand who's in what kind of mood.
It'd be interesting. So once you have all the data and you've loaded it in some graph database, you can do queries like, tell me everybody who becomes confused after a certain person speaks, and then what do they do? What do they speak about afterwards? Or how's their engagement in their late meetings throughout the day? And it's not about surveillance. It's more about trying to make sure that you're effective, right? Because when you're in in-person meetings, you get all these verbal cues. You get to see people, I don't know, disengaging, checking their cell phone. But Zoom, you only see what they want you to see, which is great. But also, it's hard to then gauge your audience.
Yeah.
I mean, just like right now, I don't know how people are responding to this. And so you just have to get used to staring to the camera and hoping it works. But getting feedback for engagement is really useful. And overall, I think obviously this company, benefits of remote work outweigh the cost. But one thing we have to mitigate is try to get better engagement in meetings.
Correct. And that's the engagement is the biggest challenge of remote work. So one of the other things that's really hard to figure out, we rely so much on body language, that kind of feedback. You just don't get that in Zoom or a Chime meeting, or whatever mechanism you're using for remote operations. So we are trying to use IVS and AWS recognition and a bunch of other tools behind the scenes to figure out whether people are engaged or not. By the way, the other kind of conversation that is not very engaging is the one where you have someone literally in a monologue.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have 10 people who are just literally staring at a screen, that's not an engaging conversation. That's not the kind of conversation you want to encourage within an organization. So you want, everyone to interact. That's the whole point of these meetings. If it's a monologue, someone should just record it and post it. You shouldn't be having a meeting wasting everyone's time on it.
Actually, I saw a blog post. It was on Hacker News a few weeks ago where a guy built himself a bot because he was a person who he recognized that he liked to ramble. And so it started warning him if he had gone on more than a 2-minute tangent. That was something he'd built personally for himself, a little Zoom bot. But this is something that you could use IVS for, to look at even just the distribution of speakers throughout a conversation. Because then also if you have people who aren't contributing to meetings, then it's a good tool to know, okay, why aren't they? Is there something about the leadership style, or is there something that can be changed to increase the engagement of all the participants?
Yeah, it also has a big application in all of our DEI efforts. Like inclusion is a big part of what we're trying to do. And when you're in remote meetings and only 1 or 2 people are interacting, as a speaker, you're so focused on conveying your views and your vision or whatever else, and you miss out on the fact that someone is not interacting. And if your IVS dashboard kind of shows you that, hey, this person hasn't interacted, you should try and engage proactively with person A, B, and C, then as part of your communication, your messaging, you can actually ask that person a question and say, do you have any questions? Do you agree with this? Not agree with it? And it really helps with making sure that the conversation is a lot more inclusive. And it separates out modes of communication. One is a meet where you want everyone to collaborate and work together. And the other one is a broadcast where you should record your videos and put them out and let people watch them asynchronously and comment on it or whatever. By the way, we have a very interesting solution on that also. We can probably bring that up during one of the sessions. So we do these little snippets of videos we record, and we allow it to review them like documents and comment them.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it really easy to communicate in a more natural manner than having to write these long documents. So yeah, some very interesting stuff built platform. So and the fact that now you can support it in full, that's pretty awesome.
It's funny. I was just thinking about that in the context of old hardware. We brought up those 3Com 3C509Bs earlier. And I remember, paired with that was my little quick cam, going into the parallel port. I think it was 60p. I think according to this, it did 320 by 240. And so now thinking that you can play with these 1080p streams is pretty fantastic. That you can have that as just another named object that you can then move around and analyze and have the bandwidth to be able to do that. And we're streaming right now from a hotel, and it seems to be fine.
Yeah. By the way, the oldest video conferencing equipment that I ever had was this 1 megapixel. And I don't think we even had a P associated with it. I'd have to work out what that would be. But it was just a 1 megapixel. It was a D-Link device that sat on top of a CRT television, and you connected it to your CRT television for video out. Over those, it was those analog
probably
cables.
Cost $1,000.
Yeah, it was pretty expensive, and it had those analog cables that would connect into your CRT televisions.
Okay, the yellow and red and white ones, like the RCA ones. Okay,
the RCA cables, and then you had you'd connect Ethernet into it. You would connect into your internet connection, and then you would only connect point to point, IP to IP. So,
interesting.
So you need to make sure that your NAT stuff, was simple enough for you to navigate through it or set up port forwarding and solve all of the issues so that you actually connect point to point between those two devices.
Oh, it to do with the actual route itself and this.
You had to manage all of that. It had no mechanism of doing any of that stuff. And from that, we moved to these life size. I don't know whether so life size got bought over by Logitech, I think, at one point of time. And I think over the years, we started remote work back in 2000. Even then, 2008, video conferencing was in its infancy. Nothing like what we have today. So I'm glad that we have full HD and more. We can do 4K. Aren't we broadcasting in 4K here?
I think we are. I'll have to check the StreamYard. Yeah, we're broadcasting whatever's not supported by StreamYard. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, and we are sitting in a hotel room in a makeshift, setup.
We gotta get a picture of the studio before we take it down. This is pretty good.
Absolutely.
All right, so interactive video service. How do we rate this? I think
this one is relatively simple and straightforward. So, I think in terms of content, it definitely simplifies. In fact, more than simplified, it actually makes the service more useful in the current context. And I'd rate this 4 or 5.
All right.
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward and simple. So
nothing. Yeah, it's a new feature. Very much. How could you complain having now you can do 720p, 1080? That's pretty good. All right. Well, let's switch gears over to personalize. Or no, we are doing AWS config. All right, here we go. AWS config supports 20 resource types. So with AWS config, I was thinking about this idea that it's configuration monitoring, right? And I was thinking about how complex our configurations have gotten. It used to be you'd have, like I mentioned earlier, one ISO flowchart. That's everything. That's the whole network. But now it's almost there's urgent behavior, right? And you have different resources that are coming and going in a very ephemeral nature. You have different scripts that some people have written who are monitoring and making changes. And overall, you reach the steady state, but then you want to make sure that you don't have any of these runaway behaviors. And that's where config can really help you. You can monitor your from a big picture, and you can monitor on a per resource type. And so what this is saying, in this article, there's new supported entities for config. Here's the 20 right here.
Yeah. I think config monitoring and management is insanely complex. I mean, take a look at the first one, the routing tables itself. So let's say you're an organization. I think we're still giving it scores.
Oh, sorry. That's the previous one?
Yeah, that's the previous one.
Yeah.
Okay. So take a look at the routing tables, for example. We have about 38,000 AWS accounts, and with a very, very complex, routing scheme across all of those different PCs and all of those different accounts. And these routing can get pretty darn long.
Yes.
And you need to monitor and make sure that there isn't any drift that happens in configurations. Let's say there are some servers that launch a change to the transit gateway. You don't want that unless it's authorized, right? You want to be able to alert when that config changes. You want the version, you want to set config for a particular service, for a particular device, for a particular setup. You want to make sure that the changes that are happening in the configuration are controlled, and you don't have random services and API making those changes. You want to detect them, you want to act on it. So I think having more and more support for detect these kind of configuration changes is incredibly valuable. You want to get alert whenever that happens, and act on it. In most cases, you are going to basically revert. So for any organization that is centrally managed, you want to be able to revert any change that happens, unless it happens via your centralized configuration management system.
Yeah.
So you want to immediately, even if somebody has admin permissions to a local.
So how does it happen if someone, say, ran a script and they ran a script with the wrong environment variable up, and all of a sudden they thought was their test account is now the production account?
I think it's a little more basic than that. Somebody might decide that, hey, this VP that I'm operating in is too restrictive. So because they have admin access to that particular account, they go ahead and open up a port, or they open up, the network to other traffic that's coming in, just to make their lives easier. Like I've seen so many people who, their security groups, they just up 0.0.0/22 or 24 or whatever, and that's a terrible idea. You don't want people to create, like that and override it locally. So at the AWS organization level, have a configuration you've already set up. Anytime you get to change in config, you can alert and then act on it and say, no, I'm writing the config back.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because as much as you'd want only one single person or single entity that's managing the configuration, that's just not practical in a large organization. But being able to see these changes and wait, this is a security violation, or a cost overrun that's going to happen if you address this. Like you said earlier about limiting that blast radius, right? You want to have things in place, mechanisms that will eliminate your or contain your blast radius. So if something goes, something's misconfigured, you don't want to find out at the billing cycle. You want to find out right away.
Exactly. And if you look at a set of these services, right, the other mechanism which config is used a lot is version control. You want to make sure that you don't haphazardly update or roll back versions of configuration across all these different systems, whether it be your notebooks, whether it be your data catalog. You want to keep control over all of those versions.
Okay.
And this config helps you manage all of that. Anytime you see that change, you get an alert and you can go ahead and roll back or manage the versions accordingly. Okay. You want all of these when you want better control over people randomly changing stuff. Config is the service you go to. Make sure that things are not kind of happening very haphazardly.
What percentage of AWS entities do you think are in config?
Right now, if you look at all the different services and all the different points, I would say just short of 50 is my guess. I haven't done the full math, but I'd say just short of about 50%.
At least given the speed at which they're rolling out new things, that's pretty good.
Correct. Yeah, I think it's pretty good, but still have. I mean, there are a bunch of services that are always playing catch up to the main service deployments.
Yeah. And this is going to be one of them. Right?
This is going to be one of them, right? VPC endpoints is the one where the service comes out first, then you come up with the VPC endpoint. You want to roll out the basic services first, and all the other peripheral. Serverless is another example. Like same platform they stamp out across all of these different, services. It just takes them time to get those things plugged in. So, yeah, I'd say this config always plays catch up, but I think they made good progress.
So then, thinking about this article, in the big, I guess in our scheme, what do we say is our rating for this one?
So I would give this a good 4.5 to 5 because
that's pretty.
It's pretty clear and obvious.
Yeah, and I think also the simplified, because it's just 20 new resources. It tells you exactly what they are. If you're a config user, you say, okay, great. I'm using gateway routing tables. Now I want to bring those into my config, and set that up so that you can keep an eye on those.
Correct. The traditional way by doing this was that you would have an event where something went down or some configuration was a problem, and then people would be screaming, let's go look at AWS CloudTrail to figure out who accessed this API to make changes to this particular service. And then you'll dig, and then you go back to the person, and then you wouldn't know, what config to bring back, and then it'd be a big exercise. So it's always post facto. You act in real time.
So I mean, that stuff is still good to know, but to know after you've reverted your changes.
Exactly. So this gives you much tighter control over that kind of a scenario.
All right. Well, let's take another 30-second break, and then we're going to be talking about personalize and recognition.
Is your AWS bill going up? CloudFix makes AWS cost savings easy and helps you with your cloud hygiene. Think of CloudFix as the Norton Utilities for AWS. AWS recommends hundreds of new fixes each year to help you run more efficiently and save money, but it's difficult to track all these recommendations and tedious to implement them. Stay on top of AWS recommended savings opportunities and continuously save 25% off your AWS bill. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right. Amazon Personalized allows rule-based promotions and recommendations. This is pretty neat and it's pretty straightforward, right? So the idea is you have a recommendation engine. It's sitting there. You bought a sandwich maker. Maybe you need a spatula or I don't know something.
You recommend to you a spatula or whatever, depending on what you want. Typically when you buy something, it says other people who bought this also bought these particular items. So depending on the parameters that are provided, the recommendation engine will give you a bunch of recommendations, decide how many you want.
This is really bad. Have you seen the one where you buy a ski mask and it recommends a baseball bat?
Yes. I've had some bad recommendations at times, but in general, when I look at something like Amazon, just look at the Amazon store. Based on the stuff I usually buy, the recommendations are almost spot on. Like especially when I'm buying groceries and stuff like that. The more data that the system has about my interaction with the Amazon shopping carts and so on, the better the predictions get.
Yeah.
Like once it realizes that I'm ordering something every month, it recommends that I make it a monthly order rather than make it, an ad hoc one, one-time thing, and it recognizes all of those patterns pretty intelligently. So, AWS Personalize is really awesome in that sense, from that standpoint. And I think the very first episode we did, the other podcast called AWS Insiders, by the way, that you can find on awseasyon.com as well. We have,
There we go.
there we go, our very first.
Oh, here we go. It's on Apple Podcast. I'll put it on awsmedia.com.
It is on awsmedia.com as well. So find that podcast there where we talk to Ankur Mehrotra, the GM of AWS Personalize. There you go. So you go to that one, and the very first episode, we talk about AWS Personalize. Really, really cool. A lot of very interesting scenarios. And what I like about this particular announcement is that one of the hard things to do is when you have a set of recommendations, you want the recommendations to be stuff that the engine first finds, but then somewhere in there you also want to recommend things that you want to push, like promotion. Right? These are things that you want to push to all users, irrespective of what the recommendation sets are. And that has historically been hard because you get a recommendation set, and you have to figure out which one of those 5 or 6 items you want to eliminate to insert one of your promotions. And then how do you figure out the distribution? Do you promote the same stuff to every your users, or do you promote it only to a set of those users? So this rule system really helps you solve that problem, where you can say, I want 20% of the recommendations to have all the skill-based items to go to all of these users.
Yeah, okay.
And so it'll embed those inside the recommendations based on also what is relevant to them. So you can say 20% of the recommendations should be stuff that I want to push, right? And the AWS Personalize will take care of that for you. It'll still seem like all very relevant recommendations, and the engine takes care of all the complexity for you.
That's something that's going to be really useful for retailers who they have particular things that they want to sell and know that certain combinations go really well together, certain pairs of products. A long time ago, well, not that long, but when I was buying baby things on Amazon, there's very clusters. There's people who like Disney branded stuff, or there's people who like organic, natural stuff, and there's kind of clusters of items in the baby gear world. And I can see being able to insert a new product into the mix, and instead of waiting for the recommendation system to pick it up to be able to promote it. That's a really neat idea.
I mean, one example, I think I read a case study some time ago where if you are buying baby products on Amazon, they always have a diaper in the recommendation. As far as I know, Amazon has never made a profit on it. They bought out diapers.com, if I'm not mistaken, at one point of time, but it's just such an essential part of the shopping experience. Like if you don't shop for diapers on Amazon, you would probably not buy the other products over there. So
yeah, and you'd never ever see that and think, I don't need diapers.
Exactly. So they would do it for it, and this is a mechanism that allows you to do that. And it's not just retail. I think there's a lot of application in any kind of content that you're serving out to individuals, whether it be news, whether it be movies, whether it be music. In all of those scenarios, you have a situation where there's a new show, and you want to recommend a show. Like if we were to have a recommendation engine for someone visiting our AWS Made Easy site, if we had to do a top 5, then in today's show, we would push AWS Personalize and all the content that we have around Personalize, because that's what we're talking about, right? That's something new. That's a new announcement. So you can push that content.
And that's the other example it gives, right? It says video on demand customers can use 40% of their rail carousel with linear live TV content.
Right. Or any new releases, like a new movie just released or online. They always have this part of the recommendations. So yeah, I mean, this makes life easy for anyone who is doing tons of recommendations as part of their application without having to manage the complexity of how to present all of that data and inject these recommendations in the middle of other standard,
Yeah, because otherwise you would have to write some code after personalized to then say, okay, take this out, put this in, and then you'd have to watch it and monitor it somewhere else. So this brings it all under one place. That's a really neat idea.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I guess in rating, I'm going to give this a symbolize. And then in terms of the article content, it would have been neat to have a hard example. I mean, they give soft examples in terms of this is the kind of thing you can do, but it would have been neat to have a concrete example to go on.
So I think what I would have loved for something like this is like the file article that we reviewed at the beginning, where there's a step-by-step, process of how you set this up. Having that step-by-step, here's how you do it in the console, here's how you set up a new rule. That would have been really neat. Of course, this is fairly intuitive. You could probably just go to the console and figure it out. But from a content standpoint, I think having that would have been really useful.
Yeah. Well, all right. So let's give that a. What do you think?
I give this a 3.5.
All right.
Yeah, 3.5 seems good.
There we go. And then there's a little half cloud there. Let's see. We have to get some outlines on these
make
graphics.
The clouds gray, I think.
Okay.
or put in an Amazon, yellow or orange, whatever the shade is.
Perfect.
The orange border around the cloud.
We do that. Okay. Well, let's go to our next one, which is recognition. All right, Amazon Recognition custom labels now supports auto-scaling inference units. I think my initial reaction to this is, okay, that's great, but IUs are really expensive. So this is interesting. So in and of itself, custom labels, the idea is you have a video stream or an image stream, and you want to look for particular objects that are going to be in the standard in the standard training set, in the standard catalog. Maybe the manufacturing scenario, or I don't know, security scenario, or you're just doing something different, and you want to be able to detect these and add these custom labels. So it's previously it said custom labels with unpredictable workloads had to set minimum inf units to support the peak volume. So this sounds like 10 years ago, right? Oh, we don't know how big of a load you're going to need, so just provision for the maximum load. That sounds very old.
This is the on-premise thinking for a cloud service.
Yes.
But I'm glad that they're changing that.
So now you can still, but I guess what surprises me about these is that, okay, now you're only charged $176 for 19 hours plus 5 hours, 24. So the use case they're giving is that you had to scale up for 5 hours out of a 24-hour day, and that only cost you $176 to the $480. This still seems really expensive. Is my reaction to this in general.
Yeah, I think so. Right now, for their inference, for the inference process, they are using a lot of the Intel chips, but they are working on their own inferentium process as well. So I foresee that this price will go on over a period of time. And as they move completely into serverless, where hopefully we will never have to worry about, setting up machines or inference units and so on. It just takes care of itself behind the scenes, where you have a bunch of queries and you get charged on a per transaction basis. I think that's the way to go. And I have no doubt that AWS will get there. Right now, they use a whole lot of Intel-based inference engines or inference processors, and they have their own new Graviton-based inferentium, or their ARM-based inferentium. It's only a matter of time before most of these will turn into a serverless setup with all of it going to inferentium. I think it was in 2020 that they announced the work that they were doing on the inferentium chip. It's available today. I just don't think it's rolled out with enough capacity.
So their entire machine learning pipeline, as that all gets standardized over to, for the most part, Graviton,
right?
Then you hopefully will be able to see things like serverless inference. And I'd imagine that these are for very low latency applications, where you'd want this still getting over that idea. You want your peak infrastructure ready all the time, but I guess
I think with any inference model, there are three dimensions of trade-off. One is what is the cost of training your model? Okay, but that's not so much on the inference side, that's more on the training side.
Mhm.
But second is what is the latency of getting the results, and what is the accuracy of getting these results? Okay, so for example, if you might be okay with the machine learning accuracy being 90% or confidence levels being 90%, you want the answer back in under 100 milliseconds.
Yeah.
But in other cases, you might actually want that confidence level to be 99%, but that might take you 2 seconds to get back results. So the workload is a function of not just the latency so much, but the latency and accuracy, because that's how much compute you will probably need.
Yeah, and there's definitely diminishing returns to accuracy, right? I remember looking at Data Robot, and they give these big leaderboards of models, and you get models that were 2% more accurate that took 10 times more power in terms of inference, in terms of training. So I guess that's a big trade-off. One thing I'm not seeing in the article is it's talking about scaling up by hour. So I guess that is the unit of granularity, right? So you can't scale up on a minute per minute basis. We're talking hours.
We're still talking about hours.
Okay.
To do this.
It does feel like where EC2 was 10 years ago. You're paying in block hours.
Correct.
Yeah, so I guess hopefully we'll move towards a serverless framework, or at least more granularity than chunks of hours. Hopefully it gets cheaper, because you want to be able to play with it and experiment with it, but it still seems a little bit pricey for that type of thing. If we wanted to build a cat detector for our garden, that might be $176 a day, or even 4 hours, a bit more of that.
I completely agree. It's not big consumer grade yet.
Yeah.
It's still, like, I think this would be completely fine if we were using this as a mechanism of detecting defect in, let's say, your chips that you were, shipping.
Yeah,
and so
where it's highly profitable and highly
correct. And you wanted to have run through defect detection on 10,000 per hour and so on. It makes sense in those scenarios, but it's still not quite commodity grade for most of the use cases where you would want to use it.
Yeah, well, if you were adding this to an app you were making for free,
yeah. Like if I wanted a content recognition, system that looked at all of my PPTs and extracted a bunch of interesting data from there, allowed me to search through all my PPTs or PDFs and stuff like that, this would not really be the mechanism to look at all those pictures.
Yeah. Well, I guess you can do it all once, and hopefully it'd make you have a lot of presentations, so it might take a couple
hours. Yeah. So, but it's a step in the right direction, moving from just saying what your upper is going to be or your maximum capacity to moving to auto scaling. Definitely a step in the right direction. I'd love to see the by second, ideally, followed by serverless, where it's transaction based.
All right. So then rating it, I think we'll give it a simplify. So definitely.
As over setting the limit, yes.
Yeah. That's better. And in terms of the article's content itself, I think it would have been interesting to know, a ballpark of a little more details into how this would work, how many inferences per second you would want, and just a bit more detail how this would work.
Right. And I think I'd give this a 3. 3 seems like a score that befits this particular.
Seems fair.
There's a lot of interesting stuff that's come out in the last week. There are a bunch more announcements, but I think this is just about the time that we have. So coming back to the event I have at hand, we have the AWS Partner Summit that's currently being held here in Anaheim, California. If you're around, once again, please come and say hi. We'd love to interact with you. We'd love to know what you would like to know, so that we can bring that into our future episodes. And I will be doing 2 talks tomorrow. One is on how you can systematically get to a 50% cost savings goal with whatever cloud bill that you have. And the second one being on why you should not really own code anymore and why code is a liability. So
Ooh, that's all my IP that I worked so hard to make.
we're going to have a long discussion about that tomorrow. So yeah, really excited to do that tomorrow. I look forward to seeing some of you here in Anaheim. And yeah,
All
we'll
right.
have a great show tomorrow.
Yeah, please, if you're around, introduce yourself. And any content that's publicly accessible, we will post that on our social media. All right, well, this is Stephen and Rahul signing off, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everyone. See you all soon.
Is your AWS public cloud bill growing? While most solutions focus on visibility, CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by finding and implementing AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe. There's zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. We've helped organizations save millions of dollars across tens of thousands of AWS instances. Interested in seeing how much money you can save? Visit cloudfix.com to